If you guys can get me a pistol, I will shoot that flag. Hello, my name is Sara Topham, and I'm playing Hedda in Hedda Gabler. The idea was originally floated to talk about favorite moments in the show, but that's a very difficult thing to do when you're playing a human being. And so really what I feel more drawn to do is to talk about, for me, the moments that matter for Hedda in the play. So here we go. I think what's really interesting about this Patrick Marber adaptation of Hedda is not so much what's on the page, but what isn't on the page, because what he's done is really edit down and distill the Ibsen text into something much more intense and compact. And that has led Molly Atkinson to a sparseness in the production. It's the company that populates this world rather than just what's on the page. My first kind of meaningful moment in the show is with Bola, who is playing Aunt Juliana. Hedda comes into this brand new house that she's just bought. She's just returned from her honeymoon. And in the house is her husband's aunt, who she finds very difficult to be around. And she does an incredibly cruel thing, which is to say about the aunt's new hat, well, the maid has left her hat lying there, it's hideous, suppose someone saw it. And it's a meaningful moment because there's a great story about Ibsen, that when he was writing this play, he had a scorpion on his desk in a jar. And the scorpion used to get kind of sick, and he would put a piece of fruit into the jar for the scorpion. But the scorpion wouldn't eat the fruit. The scorpion would sting the fruit, and then he would feel better. And there's something about that for Hedda, that when she feels pressurized by the world, by life, by family, by other people being connected and leaving her out, that she just needs to discharge her poison somewhere. And the first place you see her doing that in the play is to Aunt Juliana. Another moment that I think is really important for her is when Thea Elvsted, who's played by Joella, arrives in her home. Thea has information about Eilert Lovborg, who Hedda is very interested in because they had a past. She gets rid of her husband, sends him out of the room so she can have a private conversation with Thea. And Thea's quite scared of Hedda, because when they were in school, Hedda wasn't very nice to her. She expresses that to Hedda. She says, I don't really feel comfortable talking about this with you because we weren't really friends before. I was a bit scared of you. And it's the first time in the play that we watch Hedda take someone from the state they're in and completely turn them around into buying into what she's selling. That's because she's able to just put a mask on and become whoever it is the person across from her needs her to be in order to get what she wants. I think another really meaningful moment for Hedda is her first engagement with her father's pistols. That's the only thing she engages with in the play where she feels actually truly connected. The first thing we see her do with those pistols, aside from trying to scare her husband, is she goes to the window and Judge Brack, who's played by Tom McCamus, is entering her space through the garden. And she takes aim at him through the window and shoots at him twice. Every time we rehearsed that moment, I couldn't help but think what a spectacular event it would have been in the theater in 1890. And Ibsen put a woman on a stage shooting directly at an incredibly powerful man. I mean, that kind of thing had never, ever happened in the history of theater, really. It was revolutionary. And I think in some senses it's still revolutionary. It's still pretty shocking. And that, leads into getting to do this wonderful scene with Judge Brack. It's important because she's able to tell the truth to Judge Brack, which she doesn't do with many people. She's able to be completely herself. She does do this dance between revealing and concealing what she's really thinking and feeling. But there's no question that she feels this huge relief with him. Tom and I have worked together a lot over the years. So we haven't had to build a history between Hedda and Brack because one already exists. So that scene's meaningful to Hedda and to me for both those reasons. Tom and I always joke that our careers will be over if we ever play a happy couple. We are always playing people who are torturing each other in some way, shape, or form. This play, in some ways, is about a woman who mistakes power for freedom. And there's a place in this scene with Judge Brack where she describes how she ended up married to her husband and living in this house. And she says, I didn't even want to live in this house, but I found myself, just to make conversation, telling George that I liked this house and I wanted to live in it. And the judge says, and she says, terrible consequences. It's like she's retroactively able to see the consequence, but she's not able to see that she's doing exactly the same thing right now with everything she's building. Another really important moment is the first scene she has with Loveborg. We've heard a lot about Loveborg, and this was a very important relationship in her early young life. And Brad, who plays Loveborg, and I have an incredibly short time in order to allow the audience in on that past relationship, our relationship in the present when we're both engaged with other people. I'm married to George and he's in a kind of relationship with Thea. That's a very complicated thing for the both of them in the present. And then the audience also needs to be allowed into what the possibility for the future could be between the two of them. And we have this tiny moment to do this in. So that's one of the reasons it's really important. And the other reason is that George, her husband, comes in and out of the scene. It's a moment where Hedda does this incredibly deft thing. It's the same thing she's doing with Thea in the first scene, which is to become the person that that person needs her to be in order for her to be able to further her agenda. But in this scene, she does it so fast. And it always makes me think of when I was very, very young, I had the great privilege of being in a workshop with Marcel Marceau, the great mime artist. And he had a piece he used to do called The Mask Maker, where he would put the comedy mask on and his face would change to comedy. And then he would put the tragedy mask on and his face would turn to tragedy. And the story of that is that eventually he gets stuck in the masks and he can't take them out. And he does this incredibly quick flicker between the two of them. And I always think of that with Hedda. That's what she's doing. She has that kind of skill. She's just able to do that faster than any human being I've ever encountered in my actual real life. There's a moment in the second half of the play where Hedda is alone on stage with Berta, the maid. And I think what's interesting about this moment is Berta's the only person in the whole play who Hedda never wears a mask with, because she doesn't perceive that Berta is important enough. I think it's really good for the audience to see that absolute dropping of the mask, absolutely reality with little Berta, who's played by Kim Horseman. Kim is absolutely superb in this moment. And it's just a pleasure to be on the receiving end of it. There is a moment in Act 4 on the page, which is really Patrick Marber's invention. It doesn't exist as articulately in the Ibsen. She dances around it. And it's after she's done something really awful and her husband says to her, essentially, I can't believe you did that. What are you? And Hedda says, just me. Again, there's something so naked about that. Gordon, who plays Tesman in the play, we will have been building towards that moment all evening. She has never really told him the truth about who she is. She flickers between this incredibly harsh poison ejection and attempting to present the mask of the kind of wife that he wants. In the original Ibsen, there's a piano in the play. And that's one of the things that Patrick excised in this adaptation. But there's a very important moment at the end of the play where Hedda needs to make quite a lot of noise. And there's no way of cutting that moment in the play. It's vital. And so rather than having a piano, Patrick has written in the text, Hedda sings very loudly. And there's something so remarkable to me about that, about her human voice in the space. And I always have this image in my head, you're in a room where all the walls are closing in and the space is getting smaller and smaller. And it feels like the singing is the way that you are trying to sort of counteract that. And the only thing she has is her voice. And when I first read the script, a thing floated into my head, which is actually a quote from Cheryl Strayed's book, Wild. She's talking about singing or speaking out loud in the woods. And she says, knowing each time that no one would answer, but needing to hear a voice anyway, even if it was only my own. My voice would guard me, I believed, against the possibility that I would be lost in this wilderness forever. And I think for Hedda, that's what that is. She's down to the very last possible thing she can do, and it is to sing in the dark. And I think as human beings, we've all got some version of that in our lives. Whether it's as a small child singing in the dark to keep the monsters at bay, or whatever it is that we're afraid of that's coming for us. We have something we do that is connected to the deepest part of us that we believe is the only thing that might keep us safe. And then very quickly after that, I get a moment which is really for me, which is one of my favorite moments, that at the end of the play, during the curtain call, where the company's all assembled at the back of the stage and I get to walk towards them. It feels like crossing the finish line of a marathon, and I'm so grateful for each of them, and I couldn't do it without them. So that's my journey through Hedda Gabler, some of my journey through Hedda Gabler. And if you want to know all the rest of it and the bits in between, you're going to have to come and see us. She would very much like you to be on her side, just so you know. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. And if you happen to have an antique pistol lying around, you could use that to point and click.